My parents did not disown me with a scream. They did it with a text message sent at 2:11 in the morning that simply said, "Do not come home this year." I sat in the dark of my $5 million ranch and realized that if they wanted to exclude me, I would build a table they could not control. I invited 200 strangers to Thanksgiving dinner and accidentally started a war that exposed every secret they had tried to bury. My name is Brianna Keating, and at 34 years old, I thought I was finally immune to the specific brand of poison my family served. I was wrong. The vibration of my phone on the nightstand sounded like a chainsaw in the dead silence of the country night. I rolled over, blinking against the harsh, artificial light, and squinted at the screen. It was 2:11 in the morning. The message was from my mother. It was short, brutal, and ended with a red heart emoji that felt less like love and more like a surgical incision. "Do not come home this year." "House is full. We have other plans." I sat up in bed, the expensive Egyptian cotton sheets pooling around my waist. I was alone in the master suite of Stone Ridge Ranch, a sprawling property just outside Marlow, Colorado, that I had purchased 3 months ago. I had paid $5 million for this place. I bought it to save myself, to find a sanctuary away from the noise and the constant demand to perform. But looking at that glowing screen, the silence of the ranch felt heavy, almost suffocating. I stared at the wall, my chest tightening. This was the pattern. It had always been the pattern. Thanksgiving, Christmas, Easter. The holidays were a shrine built to worship my younger brother, Logan. Logan, who needed help with his rent. Logan, who needed his laundry done because he was too busy finding himself. Logan, who was the sun my parents orbited while I was just a cold rock floating somewhere in the outer rim. I remembered the year I was 25, stuck at the airport for 3 hours because they did not want to wake Logan from his nap to come pick me up. The phone buzzed again. This time it was my father. His message was not an explanation. It was a command. "Do not make a scene. We want peace." Peace. They wanted peace. That meant they wanted me gone so they could pretend their perfect family unit did not have a cracked foundation. I looked at the calendar app on my phone. November. This was supposed to be the first Thanksgiving since I closed the acquisition deal that put my name on the industry map. It was the biggest win of my career, a portfolio worth tens of millions. When I told them about it, my mother had just sniffed and said I was lucky the market was easy right now. To them, my hard work was just a fluke, while Logan's mediocrity was a tragedy that needed comforting. My thumb hovered over the call button. I knew I should not do it. I knew it would only hurt. But the child inside me, the one who still wanted them to be proud, pressed the icon. It rang once, twice. Then it clicked over. "You have reached the voicemail of..." I hung up before the beep. That mechanical silence hurt worse than a scream. They were awake. They were texting. They just did not want to hear my voice. They had cut me out of the family tree like a dead branch. I threw the covers off and walked out of the bedroom, down the long hall, and out onto the wraparound porch. The air was biting cold, typical for late November in Colorado. I wrapped my arms around myself and looked out at the empty paddocks and the dark outline of the barn. I had 5 bedrooms, a professional kitchen, and enough land to get lost in, and I had never felt more pathetic. I took a sharp breath, the cold air stinging my lungs. I looked at the empty space where a family should be. "If they want a table without me," I whispered to the dark, my voice shaking just a little. Then I will make a table they cannot control." I turned around and walked back inside. But I did not go to bed. I went to the kitchen island and flipped open my laptop. The blue light washed over the granite countertop. I logged into my social media account. I did not want their pity. I did not want to write a long rant about toxic parents or narcissism. I just wanted to fill the silence. I typed, "If you do not have a place for Thanksgiving, come to Stone Ridge Ranch. I have space. I have food. I have a bonfire." My finger hovered over the enter key. It was a crazy idea. It was dangerous. It was impulsive. It was exactly what I needed. I pressed the key. The status updated. I sat there in the quiet kitchen, listening to the hum of the refrigerator, completely unaware that I had just pulled the pin on a grenade that was about to blow my quiet life wide open. My private Facebook post lasted exactly 11 minutes before it breached the containment wall of my friends list. A woman I vaguely knew from high school took a screenshot and posted it to the local Marlow Community Watch group with the caption, "New owner of the old Stone Ridge place is inviting strangers for dinner. Is this real or just a PR stunt for a tax write-off?" That question was the match. The notifications were the explosion. My phone did not just buzz. It vibrated itself off the kitchen island. The messages started as a trickle and then became a flood. A digital testament to just how many people were hurting in silence. They were not asking for money. They were asking for a chair. "I am a veteran," one message read. "My wife passed in June. I just cannot stand the quiet." Another came from a nursing student at the community college. "I cannot afford the flight home to Ohio. Is it okay if I just come for an hour?" Then a newly divorced father. Then an ER nurse who was working the night shift and had nowhere to go during the day. They were the walking, empty chairs of the holiday season, the people society forgot to account for when painting Norman Rockwell scenes. I had planned for 20 people. I thought I would buy a few extra turkeys and maybe set up a long table on the porch. By noon, the confirmed list hit 60. By 4 in the afternoon, it was 120. By the time I went to bed that night, 200 people had said yes. I sat in my living room, staring at the spreadsheet I had hastily built. 200 people. I called 3 catering companies in Marlow. The first one laughed. The second one told me I was insane to ask 48 hours before the holiday. I did not call a fourth. I went into crisis management mode, the same cold, efficient gear I used at Redwood Analytics Group when a merger threatened to go sideways. "I do not need a caterer," I said to the empty room. "I need a supply chain." I reached out to 3 junior project managers from my team at Redwood. I told them I needed logistics, traffic flow planning, and parking management. I made one rule clear: no social media. I was not turning these people into content for a corporate newsletter. We were going to run this like a Black Ops mission. I went to the wholesale warehouse 2 towns over and bought their entire stock of potatoes, green beans, and frozen turkeys. I hired 4 freelance chefs who were off duty, offering them double their holiday rate in cash. I ordered 3 massive heated tents to be erected in the south pasture because my house, as big as it was, could not hold a battalion. Then the local paper called. "We heard about the event," the reporter said, her voice dripping with the anticipation of a feel-good fluff piece. "We want to bring a camera crew. It would be a great human interest story." "No," I said, cutting her off. "You can come, but no faces. Do not turn my guests into props for your holiday edition. If you film, you film. You film hands cooking or the fire. That is it." She paused, clearly annoyed, but agreed. 10 minutes later, an email pinged from a local charity foundation. They offered to donate 50 turkeys and pies, which would have saved me thousands of dollars. But there was a stipulation: they wanted to hang a banner at the ranch entrance and have a photo op with me. I hit reply and typed one sentence: "I will pay for the food myself." I was not doing this to be a hero. I was doing it to prove I existed. Late that night, as I was finalizing the seating chart on my iPad, a notification popped up from a burner account on the community thread. "She is just doing this to show off the ranch, probably trying to flip the property next year." Pathetic. I did not get angry. I did not reply. I took a screenshot, saved it to a folder labeled Evidence, and closed the tab. The wind picked up outside, rattling the heavy oak doors of the barn. It was a lonely, hollow sound. Suddenly, I could hear my mother's voice from years ago, cutting through the memory like static. "Brianna, why do you always try so hard? You make everything look so clumsy. You are just difficult to watch." I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the tents flapping in the wind. the stacks of firewood waiting to be burned, and the chaos I had invited into my sanctuary. Fine, I whispered to the reflection in the glass. If I am going to be clumsy, I will be spectacularly clumsy. Standing in the center of my high-tech kitchen, surrounded by lists of strangers and receipts for bulk turkeys, the silence of the house suddenly felt crowded with ghosts. It is funny how you can buy 500 acres of land to get away from people, but you cannot buy enough space to outrun memory. I closed my eyes, and I was 12 years old again. It was Thanksgiving morning in our cramped kitchen in Ohio. I had spent 3 hours making a pumpkin pie from scratch, carefully crimping the edges of the crust just like the pictures in the cookbook. It was perfect. I was so proud my chest hurt. I brought it to the table, holding it like it was made of glass, waiting for someone, anyone, to say good job. My mother did not even look at me. She reached out and took the knife from my hand. "Step back. Brianna," she said, her voice dismissive, like she was shooing away a fly. "Let Logan cut the pie. You are too clumsy. You will ruin the presentation." Logan was 8. He hacked the pie into uneven, crumbling chunks. My parents clapped. I stood by the refrigerator, hands behind my back, learning the first lesson of my life. My effort did not matter if I was not the one holding the knife. The scene shifted. I was 16. I walked into the living room holding a letter that said I had won a full academic scholarship to the state university. It was the only way I was going to college because my parents had already hinted the college fund was reserved for Logan. I handed the letter to my father. He scanned it, his eyes barely moving. "Is there a photo in the paper?" he asked, not looking up. "No," I said. "It is just a letter." He handed it back to me and turned his head toward the television, where the local high school football highlights were playing. "Look at that!" he yelled, pointing at the screen where Logan, a bench warmer, was high-fiving the quarterback. "That is our boy. He is really going places." I walked out of the room, the letter crumpling in my fist. Then I was 23. I had just signed my first major contract as a junior analyst. It was a starting salary higher than my father's pension. I texted my mother, thinking that money, finally, would be the language they understood. Her reply came 2 minutes later. "That is good, but remember to send some to help your brother. He is between things right now, standing in my $5 million ranch. I finally understood the architecture of my family. They did not hate me. Hate would have been passionate. Hate would have required them to think about me. It was worse than hate. They viewed me as a utility. I was a resource. I was the human equivalent of a backup generator or the person you call to fix the Wi-Fi. I was there to function, to provide, and to disappear until something else broke. I remembered Aunt Marianne, my father's estranged sister. She was the only one who ever looked at me and saw a person, one Christmas, when I was hiding in the pantry to avoid the noise. She had found me. She smelled like peppermint and cheap cigarettes. "Listen to me, Brianna," she had whispered, grabbing my chin to make me look at her. "They treat you like this because they are afraid. They are afraid. Afraid that you are better than them. And they are right." I had spent the next decade trying to prove her wrong. I tried to buy their love. I paid for anniversary dinners. I bought plane tickets. I covered Logan's rent 3 times. But every time I did, the narrative twisted. The dinner I paid for became the dinner Logan organized. The trip I funded became the trip they deserved because they raised such a good son. Whenever I shined, whenever I stood too tall, the collective gravity of the family pulled me back down. "Don't do too much, Brianna," they would say. "You make people uncomfortable." I opened my eyes. The kitchen was dark, save for the blue glow of the refrigerator display. I looked out the window at the land I owned. Stone Ridge Ranch was not just an investment. It was not just real estate. It was a declaration of independence written in dirt and timber. For the first time in 34 years, I felt the desperate need to please them evaporate. It lifted off my shoulders like steam. This Thanksgiving dinner with 200 strangers was not a cry for help. It was not a tantrum. It was not designed to make them love me or miss me. I looked at the reflection of my own face in the dark glass. I am done auditioning, I said to the empty room. This feast was to prove one simple, terrifying fact. I did not need to be chosen by them anymore. I could choose myself. The kitchen island was no longer a place for cooking. It was a war room. I had a large layout of the ranch spread across the granite, marked up with red Sharpie like a battle plan. I designated the renovated barn as the primary dining sector to shield everyone from the wind. The fire pit area in the south pasture was the social zone, and the small guest cottage near the creek was marked as the quiet zone. I knew some of these people would be overwhelmed. Grief is loud, but sometimes it needs silence. So I wanted a place where people could go just to breathe without having to smile at a stranger. We have 200 civilians incoming. I told the head of the security team I had hired from Denver. They were 4 ex-military guys who looked like they could stop a tank with a stare. I have 3 rules. 1. Treat everyone with absolute respect. 2. De-escalate any conflict immediately. Emotions are going to be high. And 3. No unauthorized filming. If you see someone sticking a phone in a guest's face who clearly does not want to be on TikTok, you shut it down. Politely, the lead guard nodded. We will keep a low profile. Ms. Keating. Invisible perimeter. My phone buzzed with a weather alert. A freak snowstorm was tracking south, aiming straight for Marlow. The temperature was predicted to drop 20 degrees in 4 hours. I did not panic. I picked up the phone and called the industrial supply company in town. I need 10 industrial propane heaters, I said, cradling the phone between my shoulder and ear while highlighting the barn entrance on my map. And I need 50 heavy wool blankets. Yes, I will pay the rush fee. Just get them here by sunset. I was moving so fast I barely felt my feet touch the floor. It was the same adrenaline high I got closing a deal, but this time the stakes felt personal. At 3 in the afternoon, the gate buzzer sounded. The intercom video showed a man in a parka holding a camera bag. I am a freelance journalist, his voice crackled through the speaker. I just wanted to come in a bit early to set up lighting for the arrival shots. Get the vibe right. My stomach tightened. Something about his tone was too slick, too eager. I did not approve any early access, I said, pressing the talk button firmly. And we are not a film set. You can wait outside the property line until the gates open tomorrow. Come on, he wheedled. I can make you look like a saint. This is a great story. Leave, I said, and cut the feed. I watched the monitor until his car backed away. He did not look like a journalist. He looked like a man casing a joint. An hour later, a familiar SUV crunched up the gravel driveway. It was Sloane Mercer. She stepped out of the car carrying a large object wrapped in brown paper. Sloane was the only person from my old life who had made the transition to this new one. She walked into the kitchen, dumped her bag, and tore the paper off the object. It was a heavy, reclaimed wood sign, hand-carved with burned lettering, "Seat for whoever shows up." I stared at it, my throat suddenly tight. I know you, Sloane said softly, leaning against the counter. You are planning for everyone else. I thought you needed a reminder of why you are doing this. I took the sign and walked out to the barn. The long tables were already set up, stretching almost the entire length of the floor. I walked to the very head of the main table and placed a single empty wooden chair there. I propped the sign against it. This was not a seat for my mother or my father. I was not saving space for their apology. This seat was for the version of me that used to wait by the window, hoping to be included. She did not have to wait anymore. I pulled out my phone and drafted the opening remarks for tomorrow. I deleted 3 versions that sounded too angry or too sad. I settled on something brutal and simple. At this table, we do not ask you what you have lost. We only ask if you want seconds. Night fell heavy and dark. The wind was already whipping the tops of the pine trees, signaling the incoming storm. I was doing a final perimeter check on the security cameras from my laptop in the living room. The screens showed the grayscale view of the fences and the long driveway. Suddenly, Motion detected on camera 4. A dark pickup truck was moving slowly past the main gate. It was driving under the speed limit, crawling along the road. It did not have its headlights on, only the amber parking lights. I leaned in, zooming in on the feed. The truck paused right at the entrance of Stone Ridge Ranch. It sat there for 10 seconds, the brake lights flaring red in the darkness, casting a bloody glow on the snow. Then, it accelerated rapidly and disappeared around the bend. I sat back, my heart hammering a rhythm against my ribs. That was not a guest looking for the address. That was not a neighbor. That was a scout. I had the distinct, chilling sensation that someone was watching the ranch, and I knew, with a sudden, sharp clarity, that they were not interested in the turkey or the charity. They were calculating something else entirely. The smell of roasted turkey, sage, and wood smoke hit the cold Colorado air long before the first guest stepped through the barn doors. I had expected chaos, but what arrived was something far more tender. They came in shy clusters, parking their battered sedans and pickup trucks on the gravel lot I had designated with orange cones. They carried Tupperware containers of green bean casserole, foil-wrapped pies, and rusted folding chairs, clutching them like shields. I stood by the entrance, not as the owner of a $5 million ranch, but just as the person opening the door. A man with gray stubble and a fading navy baseball cap stopped in front of me. He held a tray of cornbread with shaking hands. I did not think this was real, he said, his voice cracking slightly. I saw the post and I thought, maybe it was a joke. I thought I would get to the gate and be turned away. It is real, I said, taking the heavy tray from him. And you are late. We need that cornbread on table 4. He smiled, and the tension in his shoulders dropped 2 inches. He was a retired firefighter, I learned later. He told me between bites of mashed potatoes that he had lost his bungalow in a wildfire last year. He had insurance, but he had lost the photos, the heirlooms, the things that made a house a home. Now he lived in a studio apartment that smelled like damp plaster. This barn, he said, looking up at the high wooden beams, smells like hope. I moved through the crowd, but I refused to take the stage. I did not want to be the benevolent benefactor looking down from a podium. I went straight to the makeshift kitchen station we had set up in the corner. I rolled up the sleeves of my cashmere sweater, put on an apron, and started chopping chives. I washed dishes. I carved meat. I wanted them to see that my hands were red from the hot water, just like theirs. I wanted to be human, not a headline. A woman in blue medical scrubs sat near the edge of the fire pit, holding a cup of hot cider with both hands as if it were a lifeline. She looked exhausted. 36 hours, she whispered to the stranger sitting next to her. I just finished a 36-hour shift. My family is 3 states away. I just needed to not be alone. Further down the long table, an older gentleman in a pristine gray suit sat in silence. He did not eat immediately. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a single white rose, the stem wrapped in wet paper towel. He placed it gently on the table in front of the empty space beside him. He patted the tablecloth, a quiet gesture to a wife who was no longer there. And then he picked up his fork. No one asked him why. Everyone understood. Sloane appeared beside me, her face flushed from the heat of the ovens. She pointed to a large corkboard she had dragged out of the office and propped up near the drink station. The wall of gratitude, she said. People were already pinning notes to it. Scraps of napkin, backs of receipts, yellow legal paper. I am grateful for warm socks. I am grateful I woke up. I am grateful for a seat. Suddenly, a chord strummed through the chatter. A group of 3 young men, who I assumed were college students, had brought their guitars. They stood near the dessert table and began to play. It was unrehearsed and raw. They played a cover of Home is a Verb. The sound of silverware scraping against china stopped. The conversation died down. The music swelled, bouncing off the timber walls, filling the empty spaces in the room. When they finished, the silence held for a heartbeat, and then the applause erupted loud, raucous and genuine. I stepped out the side door to get some fresh air and saw a figure sitting on a hay bale near the horse stalls. It was a young girl, maybe 20 years old, with purple streaks in her hair. Her shoulders were shaking. I walked over and sat down next to her. I did not ask her what was wrong. I did not ask about her parents or why she was here instead of there. I just pulled a packet of tissues from my pocket and held it out. She took it, wiping her eyes aggressively. "I am sorry," she choked out. It is just the first time I have felt safe in a long time. "It is overwhelming." "I know," I said softly. "Eat some pie. It helps." Back inside, Sloane rushed up to me with her phone. "Look," she said. One of the guests was live streaming the event. The camera angle was low, respectful. It showed the roaring fire, the piles of food, the hands passing plates, but never a face. The viewer count was climbing by the second. The caption read, "Thanksgiving at a stranger's ranch. Proof the world is not dead yet." I felt a lump in my throat. I grabbed a glass of sparkling cider and tapped it with a spoon. The room quieted down. Hundreds of eyes turning to me. "I do not have a speech," I said, my voice projecting clearly over the crackle of the fire. "I just want to propose a toast to the people who were removed from the table, and yet were still kind enough to pull up a chair and sit with us." Cheers. Cheers. The room roared back. Laughter erupted again, a warm, chaotic sound that chased away the ghosts of my own family. But as I took a sip of my drink, my phone buzzed in my apron pocket. It was a haptic alert from the security system. I pulled the phone out and glanced at the screen. The smile froze on my face. The camera at the main gate, a mile down the driveway, had triggered. A figure was standing there in the snow, just outside the perimeter. They were not trying to buzz in. They were not moving toward the keypad. They were just standing in the dark, staring up toward the house, watching the celebration. And even through the grainy night vision, I could tell they were not happy. I pulled my coat tighter against the biting wind and walked toward the main gate. The security lights cast long, skeletal shadows across the snow. By the time I reached the end of the driveway, the figure was gone. The only proof that anyone had been there was a set of fresh tire tracks cutting deep into the slush and a small, rectangular piece of cardstock lying face up in the white drift. I bent down and picked it up. It was cold and wet against my fingers. It was a business card. The logo was embossed in silver Hawthorne Realty Solutions. I had never heard of the company. Below, it was a name I did not recognize. But my eyes locked onto the email address printed at the bottom. It was not a corporate email. It was Bribery Bluebird 88. A chill that had nothing to do with the winter air shot down my spine. That was not just a random string of characters. That was my nickname from sophomore year of high school. Only my yearbook committee and my immediate family knew that name. I stared at the card, my breath hitching in my throat. This was not a sales call. This was a signal. I turned and walked back to the house, my pace quickening. I found Sloane in the mudroom, organizing the coat check. I pulled her into the pantry and shut the door. "Check the original post," I said, my voice low and urgent. "Did I accidentally leave a geotag on? Did I link my personal email?" "The old one." Sloane frowned, pulling out her phone immediately. She scrolled for a minute, her thumbs flying over the glass. "No," she said, looking up. "It is clean. Just the ranch location, which is public record, and the new burner email we set up for RSVPs. Why? Because someone knows." I said. Someone knew exactly who I was before I even posted. My phone buzzed in my hand. I looked down. It was my mother. After days of silence, after ignoring my calls, she had finally decided to speak. "People are asking why you are doing this. It is all over the local news. Are you trying to shame this family? You need to stop making us look bad." I read the words twice. There was no concern. There was no question about whether I was safe hosting 200 strangers. There was only the panic of image management. I did not feel the familiar sting of rejection this time. Instead, I felt a cold clarity washing over me. They were not hurt. They were worried about the narrative. I walked back out into the main room, trying to keep my face neutral. I made my way toward the coffee station. A man I had noticed earlier, sharp eyes, well-dressed but wearing a worn-out coat, stepped into my path. He held a paper cup, but he was not drinking. "Ms. Keating," he said. His voice was quiet, barely a whisper under the noise of the crowd. "My name is Evan Rhodes. I am an attorney. I do not want to alarm you, but I specialize in estate litigation." I stopped, looking at him. "Okay. Enjoy the turkey." "Evan." He stepped closer, invading my personal space just enough to be heard but not enough to be aggressive. "I have been listening to some of the chatter online," he said, "and I saw that card you just picked up. Hawthorne Realty is not a standard brokerage. They specialize in distressed asset acquisition and hostile title transfers. You should lock down the papers on this ranch. Tonight. Someone might be targeting the asset." His words hit me like a physical blow. The noise of the party faded into a dull roar. Suddenly, a memory from 3 months ago surfaced: a casual Sunday phone call with my father. He had asked about the ranch, but he had not asked about the view or the horses. "So, Brianna, what is the exact acreage again? And the deed. Is it just in your name? Or did you put it in an LLC, for tax purposes? What is the assessed value now?" At the time, I thought he was just being a dad, maybe even impressed by my investment. Now, the memory tasted like ash. I excused myself and walked straight to my office, locking the door behind me. My hands were shaking, not from cold, but from adrenaline. I opened my laptop and logged into my old family email server, the one I shared with my parents years ago, but never bothered to deactivate. I searched for Hawthorne. Nothing. Then I searched for title. A thread popped up from 6 months ago. It was between my mother and a real estate broker I did not know. The subject line was "Options for Co-Ownership Edition." I clicked it open. My heart hammered against my ribs as I read my mother's words. If a family member is unstable or overwhelmed, what is the fastest way to add a parent to the deed for their own protection? We want to make sure the asset stays in the family. I sat back in my chair, the glow of the screen illuminating the dark room, the text at 2 a.m, the exclusion from Thanksgiving, the silence. It was not because they preferred Logan. It was not just because they found me annoying. They were trying to isolate me. They wanted me to feel alone, unstable, and desperate for connection, so that when they finally showed up with a solution, a legal solution to help me manage my big, scary ranch, I would sign the papers out of gratitude. "My God," I whispered to the empty room. "It is not a family feud. It is a heist." The Monday after Thanksgiving, the festive atmosphere at Stone Ridge Ranch was gone, replaced by the cold, sterile hum of a war room. I did not waste time with emotional hangovers. I called Evan Rhodes, the attorney who had eaten turkey at my table 3 days ago, and hired him on retainer. By 9 a.m, he and an independent notary were sitting at my dining table, sifting through a stack of county records and title deeds. I sat opposite them, drinking black coffee. My hands were steady. The hurt was gone, replaced by a terrifying level of focus. "Here," Evan said, sliding a document across the mahogany table. "We found this in the rejected pile at the county clerk's digital archive. It was filed electronically 4 weeks ago. It was a request for a change of address for legal notices regarding the property tax assessments of Stone Ridge Ranch. The request asked for all official correspondence to be diverted to an address in Ohio." "My parents' address? It was rejected," Evan continued, tapping the paper, because the digital signature did not match your registered biometrics on file. "But look at the applicant section." I looked. The name listed as the authorized representative was mine, but the social security number was off by 2 digits, and the contact phone number listed. It was not mine. It belonged to my brother, Logan. They tried to redirect my mail. I said, my voice flat. If they control the notices, they control the narrative. They could claim I missed payments. They could manufacture a default. It is clumsier than that, Evan said, leaning back. They used a fake social. That is fraud, but it shows intent. They are trying to establish a paper trail that says they manage your affairs. Sloane walked in from the living room, her face grim. She was holding her tablet like a weapon. It gets worse on the PR front, she said. That anonymous account, the one that called you a show-off, I ran a linguistic analysis on their posts compared to public comments made by your family members over the last year. The syntax matches Logan almost perfectly. She turned the screen to face me. The account was no longer just calling me vain. It was pivoting to a new narrative. Must be nice to buy a $5 million ranch with family money and then kick them out. She is an ungrateful daughter who took their investment and ran. They are seeding the jury pool, I said, realizing the strategy instantly. They are painting a picture that this ranch was a joint venture. If they can convince a court or even just the court of public opinion that they gave me seed money, they can claim an equity stake. Exactly, Evan said. And right on cue. Look at this. He pulled up a video file on his laptop. It was a clip from the local morning news in Ohio, aired just 2 hours ago. The headline read, "Heartbroken parents of viral ranch host speak out." I watched my mother and father sitting on their beige sofa. My mother was dabbing her eyes with a tissue. My father looked stoic, the picture of a weary patriarch. We always supported Brianna, my mother said to the reporter, her voice trembling. We sacrificed everything to get her where she is. We just wanted to be part of her success. Then the camera zoomed in on my father. He looked directly into the lens. We are proud of the ranch, he said, his voice firm. That ranch is also the result of our family's achievement. We built that foundation together. I paused the video. The frame froze on his face. There it is, I said softly. He did not say he was proud of me. He said the ranch is their achievement. The final piece of the puzzle clicked into place. This was never about a dinner invitation. It was not about hurt feelings. It was a hostile takeover disguised as a family dispute. They wanted to prove that my success was actually their asset. If they could prove constructive trust or an implied partnership, they could force a sale. They could cash out my hard work to pay off whatever debts Logan had likely racked up. What do you want to do? Evan asked. We can send a cease and desist. We can sue for defamation. No, I said, standing up. If we sue now, we look like the aggressors. We look like the ungrateful child they are painting me to be. I walked to the window and looked out at the snow-covered fields. I did not want to win a legal skirmish. I wanted to end the war permanently. I needed them to destroy their own case. I needed them to admit, on record, that they had contributed nothing. We do not sue, I said, turning back to them. We invite them in. Sloane looked at me, confused. You want to invite them here. After this, yes, I said. They want a piece of the ranch. Fine. I will invite them to a private family reconciliation dinner to discuss the future of the property. Just us. No press. And then Evan asked. And then, I said, we let them talk. We let them think they have won, and we let the truth hang them. The email from my mother arrived exactly 48 hours after their television appearance. It was a masterpiece of passive-aggressive diplomacy, titled simply Moving Forward, Brianna. We want to put this behind us. Let's have a makeup dinner at the ranch. Just family. We can take a nice photo together to show everyone that the Keatings are still united. We can fix this. I stared at the screen. They did not want to fix anything. They wanted a photo op to stop the bleeding of their reputation and access to the house to start working on the title. Then came the text from Logan. He lacked our mother's finesse. "You are taking this too far," he wrote. "You are making Mom and Dad look like fools. Just let them come over." They said you will sign anyway once you calm down. I read that last sentence 3 times. They said you will sign anyway. It was not a prediction, it was an assurance. They were coming with a pen, and they were entirely confident that guilt, pressure, or perhaps something worse would force my hand. I picked up my phone and typed a reply to my mother. I kept it short, devoid of warmth, but compliant enough to bait the hook. "Okay. Saturday at 6, a private dinner, but we need to talk about the property seriously." I hit send, then I went to work. The next 2 days were a blur of cold, hard preparation. I was not setting a table for a family meal. I was preparing a crime scene investigation before the crime had even occurred. I called Evan Rhodes and asked him to come back to the ranch. "I need you here," I told him, "but not as my lawyer, not initially. I need you to be a guest, a friend." We set the stage with surgical precision. I had a security team install high-definition cameras in the living room and dining area. Under Colorado law, I could record video in my own home, but I wanted to be extra careful. I placed a digital audio recorder in the center of the dining table, right next to the floral arrangement. I planned to announce it the moment they walked in. I would tell them that since we were discussing business, I wanted a record. If they stayed, they consented. Sloan arranged for the witnesses. Evan would be there. So would the notary, a woman named Sarah who could blend into the wallpaper. And finally, a representative from the community fund I had been quietly talking to. We positioned them in the library, visible through the open French doors, ostensibly enjoying a drink as friends of Brianna, but actually there to witness every word. I wrote down my demands on a legal pad. I did not want money. I wanted 3 things. First, the absolute truth about why they excluded me. Second, a specific apology that acknowledged their greed. And third, a signed document relinquishing any future claim to Stone Ridge Ranch. On Saturday morning, 5 hours before they were due to arrive, a courier truck crunched up the driveway. He handed me a thick manila envelope. There was no return address, just my name scrawled in block letters. I took it into the kitchen and tore it open. Inside were photocopies of old emails and a property deed from 12 years ago. I started reading, and the blood drained from my face. The emails were between my mother and a woman I vaguely remembered, Great Aunt Tessie, who had passed away in a state-run nursing home. "Tessie, we just want to help you manage the estate." My mother had written in 2013, "If you add us to the title, we can handle the taxes for you." The next document was a transfer of deed, signed by Tessie with a shaky hand, giving 50% ownership to my parents. The final document was a foreclosure notice. They had leveraged her paid-off house to take out a loan, likely to fund one of Logan's failed business ventures, and then defaulted. Tessie had lost everything. A note was clipped to the back of the stack. It was handwritten in messy blue ink. "They have done this before. Don't be the next Tessie." I dropped the papers onto the counter. My hands were trembling. This was not just about me being the black sheep. This was not just toxic parenting. My parents were predators. They had a playbook, and I was just the latest target with a juicy asset. I looked up at the clock. It was 2 in the afternoon. They would be here in 4 hours. "Okay," I whispered to the empty kitchen, feeling a cold resolve harden in my chest like ice. No screaming, no crying. I gathered the papers and placed them neatly next to the audio recorder on the dining table. I was done waiting for an apology they were incapable of giving. Tonight was not going to be a reconciliation. It was going to be a deposition. And they were going to walk right into it. At 6 o'clock, the headlights of my parents' sedan swept across the front porch. They walked in not like family members arriving for a reconciliation, but like politicians arriving for a campaign stop. My mother had her heavy DSLR camera hanging around her neck, ready to capture the proof of our happy reunion. My father was wearing his best navy blazer, the one he usually reserved for church or loan applications. And Logan was grinning, smoothing down his hair as if he were walking into a networking event rather than his sister's home. "Brianna," my mother exclaimed, reaching out for a hug that I sidestepped. She laughed, a brittle, tinkling sound. "Oh, honey, you look so tired. You really blew this whole thing out of proportion. You know how sensitive you get." We were just worried about the overcrowding. I did not offer them a drink. I did not offer them coats. I gestured to the dining table where the audio recorder was already blinking a steady red light. "Sit down," I said. "We are not taking photos. We are talking, clearly." My father sat at the head of the table, or at least he tried to, until he saw I had removed the chair. He settled for the side, clearing his throat. "Listen, Brianna," he started, his voice dropping into his serious, father-knows-best register. "We have been thinking, this ranch. It is a massive liability. $5 million in asset value sitting out here unprotected. It is dangerous. Dangerous for who I asked. Leaning against the sideboard. For the family," he said, tapping his finger on the wood. "We think it is best if we structure this properly. Family should have shared assets. You should add our names to the deed. It is called... What is it called? Diversifying risk. If something happens to you, the state takes it. If we are on the title, the family is safe." My mother chimed in, her eyes wide and wet with faux concern. "Exactly, sweetheart. A single woman out here alone, it invites trouble. If your father and I are co-owners, it sends a message of strength. We just want you to be safe. We want you to have peace of mind." Her voice was sweet, like syrup masking the taste of medicine, but her eyes were cold. They were calculating the square footage. I looked at Logan. He was tapping his foot, impatient. "Come on, Bree," he said, rolling his eyes. "It is just a signature. Just sign the addendum. The guys at Hawthorne said they could file it by Monday morning if we get it notarized tonight." The room went deadly silent. The air conditioner hummed. "Hawthorne," I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Who told you about Hawthorne?" Logan froze. He looked at Dad, then back to me, realizing he had just said the quiet part out loud. I mean, just affirm Dad knows. Whatever. Hawthorne Realty Solutions," I said. "The predatory acquisition firm." I turned toward the library doors. Sarah. Evan Rhodes stepped out, smoothing his suit jacket. Sarah, the notary, followed him, carrying a thick folder of documents. She set the folder on the table with a heavy thud. My father stood up, his face flushing a deep, angry red. "Who are these people? This is a private family dinner. This was never a dinner," I said. "Evan is my attorney. And this is a deposition." Evan opened the folder. He laid out 3 pieces of paper in a neat row. "Exhibit A," Evan said calmly. "A request to change the legal mailing address for Stone Ridge Ranch, filed 4 weeks ago. Rejected because the signature was forged. Exhibit B," he continued. The application used a social security number that differs from Brianna's by 2 digits, but it matches the number listed on a defaulted car loan for a Mr. Logan Keating. "And Exhibit C," I said, pulling up my tablet and pressing play. The video of their interview played my father looking into the camera and claiming the ranch was the result of the family's achievement. My mother gasped. She looked at the papers, then at the camera around her neck, and then she burst into tears. But they were not sad tears. They were panic tears. I do not know what that is," she wailed. "We were just trying to help. Why are you attacking us?" My father slammed his hand on the table. "This is ridiculous. We are your parents. We have a right to ensure this property is managed correctly." Logan, realizing the ship was sinking, turned on me, his face twisting into a sneer. "You set us up. You invited us here to humiliate us. Is that it?" You are doing all this just to get revenge because we didn't save you a seat at the table. I looked at them. I looked at the greed etched into their faces, the entitlement that rotted them from the inside out. I felt a strange sense of peace. The cord was finally cut. "No," I said, my voice steady and sharp as a scalpel. "You did not exclude me because of space. You excluded me because you needed me to feel small. You wanted me isolated. You wanted me desperate for approval so that when you showed up with a contract, I would be weak enough to sign it." I leaned forward, placing my hands on the table. "Well," I said, "I am not weak anymore." I reached over and pressed the playback button on the small digital recorder sitting in the center of the table. The room was so quiet that the mechanical click sounded like a gunshot. My father's voice, recorded only minutes ago, filled the dining room, clear and damning. "We need to get on the deed to control the asset. Once we are legal owners, we can leverage it." I stopped the recording. My father sat frozen, his mouth slightly open, the color draining from his face until he looked like a wax figure. My mother gripped her camera strap as if it were a lifeline. "That is not what I meant," my father stammered, his voice climbing an octave. I was speaking hypothetically. It sounded very specific to me," I said calmly. I reached for the manila envelope that had arrived that morning and slid it across the mahogany table. Just like it was specific with Aunt Mary Ann. My mother flinched. The name hung in the air like smoke. "You recognized the envelope, did you not?" I asked. It came from her. "She sent me the records of how you pressured her into signing over her home 15 years ago. She wanted to make sure I did not become the next victim on your list." Logan looked at the papers, then at our parents. "Wait, you guys said Aunt Tessie gave you that house." "They took it," I corrected him, "just like they planned to take this." Evan Rhodes stepped forward then, placing a thick, bound document on the table. He did not look like a guest anymore. He looked like a shark in a suit. "And this," Evan said, "is the reason your plan would never have worked anyway. As of 9 o'clock this morning, the Stone Ridge Ranch title has been transferred." My father's eyes widened. "Transferred to who you sold it." "No," I said. "I put it into an irrevocable trust. I do not own it anymore. Not technically. The trust owns it, and the beneficiaries are a series of local community programs for the elderly and the homeless." I watched the realization hit them. It was a physical blow. "That means," I continued, my voice steady, "that you cannot inherit it. You cannot leverage it. You cannot bully me into adding your names because I do not have the legal authority to do so anymore. It is locked, forever." "And that dinner with 200 strangers," Sloan added from the doorway, stepping in with a triumphant smile. It was not just a dinner. It was a soft launch for the Marlowe Open Table Fund. "We raised enough donations in 48 hours to keep this program running for 3 years. Brianna is just the caretaker now." My mother slumped in her chair. She looked small. The narrative she had built, the caring mother, the supportive family, had dissolved. They had nothing. They had no image to protect because I had the recording. They had no money to extract because the ranch was in a trust. And they had no control because I had witnesses. "Please," my mother whispered, tears finally spilling over, real tears this time. "Please do not put this online. Please do not ruin us. Brianna." I looked at her. I felt a flicker of the old guilt, but I crushed it instantly. "I do not need to shame you," I said. "I just need you to stop touching my life." I stood up and walked to the head of the table. "If you ever want to come back here," I said, looking at each of them, "it will be without cameras. It will be without asking for money. And it will be after you learn how to apologize for the right things." Logan stood up, panic rising in his eyes. He was vibrating with anxiety. But the guys at Hawthorne? I owe them a finder's fee for the deal. I promised them access. Brianna, you have to help me. I am in deep. I looked at my brother. For years, I had been his safety net, his bank, his second mother. I am helping you, I said softly. Saving you does not mean destroying myself. Figure it out. Logan. I picked up the wooden sign that Sloan had made, the one that read, "Seat for whoever shows up." I walked to the empty chair at the head of the table, the spot my father had tried to claim. I turned the sign around so it faced me. "I think this seat is taken," I said. My family left in silence. There were no hugs. There were no promises to call. They walked out the front door and into the cold night, their sedan's taillights fading down the long driveway. I walked out onto the porch. The wind had died down. In the distance, near the fire pit, I saw sparks rising into the dark sky. A group of the guests from Thanksgiving, the firefighter, the nurse. The students had come back to help clean up and finish the leftovers. They were laughing. Someone was strumming a guitar. I wrapped my cardigan tighter around myself and smiled. The house was mine. The silence was gone. And for the first time in my life, I knew exactly who belonged at my table. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from, so please comment your location down below so we can connect and share our thoughts. Don't forget to subscribe to the Mira Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and smash that hype button to help this story reach even more people.